Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Julie Fine, I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, the presidential sit-down amid a $20 billion lifeline. The steps the president and the administration are now taking to shore up Argentina's economy and its leader, Javier Milei, who's in dire need of cash and facing elections less than 2 weeks from now. Details around the rescue package as the U.S. Treasury starts buying Argentine pesos. We'll have more on the story, plus the state of government shutdown now in its 14th day when Democratic Senator, ranking member of the Senate Banking Committee, Elizabeth Warren, joins us moments from now.
Plus, strong words from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell signaling the central bank may stop shrinking its balance sheet in the coming months. That and what he's now indicating about the labor market's prospects and expectations for another rate cut in the coming weeks.
And as Trump hails a new Middle East, the many questions surrounding the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, including the state of humanitarian aid entering Gaza, when Danon, Israeli ambassador to the U.S., joins us minutes from now. But we begin tonight with news from the White House. Hours after Argentinian President Javier Milei sat down with President Trump as a $20 billion lifeline was formally announced to keep Argentina afloat. Now, many questions on the fine points of the deal as some in Washington cry foul, including our next guest, who just finished taking to the Senate floor, pushing forward a resolution to quash the Argentina bailout. And who was name-checked as well at the White House today, I should mention, by the president himself and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Take a listen.
We're confident that President Milei is going to do well. We've been criticized by a couple of American Peronists, like Senator Warren. And you know, she and
it's a compliment.
Yeah.
She has no idea what she's doing. She's a nasty, horrible senator. Go ahead. Other than that, I like her very much.
Yeah, and she and her protege in New York, Mandame, who I don't even think he's a Peronist. I think he's more the communist chauvinismo. So we stand with the president and what he stands for and the hope for the Argentinian people.
Well, this is a heck of a way to start a conversation. Joining us live from Capitol Hill, Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, again, ranking member, Senate Banking Committee, member of the Senate Finance Committee. Senator, it's good to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. You sure seem to be top of mind, if not top of word, every time the president speaks lately. And I want to ask you about your effort to quash this bailout, as many are calling it, for Argentina. The president said today, this is a direct quote, "Just helping a great philosophy take over a great country. We don't have to do it," he said. "It's not going to make a big difference for our country." How many Republicans, how many America First Republicans did you get to sign on?
Yeah, you know, you ask exactly the right question. Donald Trump ran for office proclaiming he would do America first. Instead, he is sending $20 billion American taxpayer dollars to bail out his buddy in Argentina, and he's doing this after Argentina has just cozied up to China and cut a deal with China that takes the legs out from underneath American soybean farmers. So let me get this straight. Argentina hurts American farmers, and the President of the United States responds by giving $20 billion to Argentina, plus Secretary Bessent saying, and a blank check if they need more. That's pretty appalling.
Will Congress not have a chance to weigh in outside of your legislation? Is this money as good as Argentina's?
Well, that's what I want to do. I just went to the floor of the Senate and introduced the bill and asked for unanimous consent that we move it forward, and there was an objection. So now I'm just saying to the Republicans, look, you guys have criticized this. I've heard Chuck Grassley speak out against it. Other senators who represent farmers in their home states saying this is a terrible idea. Well, you know, this is your chance. Not just talk, you can actually take action here. The United States Senate has the power to say, no, we're not going to do this. So let's just bring it to the floor and vote. Because I feel pretty sure that if everybody had a chance in the Senate to vote on this, that the answer would be no money to Argentina. Thank you very much. We'd rather support our farmers and families here in America.
So do you know if you're going to get a vote? Will this go to the floor?
You know, the person who determines that is the Republican leader, not the Democrats. So all I can do is keep raising the alarm about this and asking people all over this country to let the Republicans know that we want to vote on this. We want to put a stop to this. You know, the American soybean farmers have really been hurt, and American farmers who are growing other crops have been hurt as well. Because when Donald Trump has done this, tariffs on, tariffs off, 100% tariffs, 50% tariffs, 20% tariffs, many buyers of those agriculture products who our farmers spent, some of them have spent decades developing those markets and those relationships. They said, look, if your president is going to impose tariffs on my home country, I can't buy your product. And that's putting our American farmers under a lot of pressure. The soybean farmers in particular got targeted by China and Argentina. Argentina doing a deal with China to cut out American soybean farmers. That's just not right. And we should not be rewarding a country that acts against the interests of the American people and the American farmer. And that is exactly what Donald Trump is doing.
Senator, I want to turn from Argentina now to Capitol Hill. I'm curious if you have spoken to the minority leader, Chuck Schumer, about his plans next and what's going on with the shutdown and when people can expect to feel some relief.
So I don't talk about private conversations, but let me put it this way. Democrats are really clear about what we're asking for. We want the Republicans just to roll back those cuts that are going to knock 15 million Americans off their health care coverage and drive up insurance costs for tens of millions more Americans. That's all we're asking for here. And the Republicans right now literally will not even sit down and negotiate. The House is out for its 4th week of vacation, so they can't even be here to vote. And the Senate just says no talking. You know, that's not how it works in a democracy. We're fighting to try to help Americans be able to afford their health care. And I want to be clear, I'm not defending the American health care system. I think it's badly broken. But what Trump is doing to that system, along with the Republicans, is they're going to take a creaky, barely functioning system and just smash it apart. And that ultimately is going to hurt everybody in this country. And we're just trying to push back. Say, just give people back the coverage they had back in June. We're not trying to rewrite the whole system. We're not spending any additional money. Just give people what they had a few months ago before Donald Trump and the Republicans passed that one big, beautiful bill.
Senator, I do want to turn to your home state of Massachusetts right now in the short time that we do have left. President Trump saying today he was very critical of the Boston mayor, in fact, saying at one point that he would consider pulling the World Cup games from Boston. Of course, that is something that is up to the head of FIFA. However, are you concerned that Boston could be the next target for National Guard troops?
You know, let me just start by saying what a terrific job Michelle Wu, who is mayor of Boston, is doing. In fact, she just won in the primary for her reelection, which comes up in November, by 49 points, so much so that her opponent dropped out. So the people of Boston really seem to think that she's doing a pretty terrific job. And given that Boston has the lowest crime rate of any major city in America, that Michelle Wu has done more on affordable housing and to put more, create more child care slots, really tells you why she is much respected and often much loved in the city of Boston. For Donald Trump to attack her, it seems to me, is just a way to say he doesn't like people who are not bowing the knee to Donald Trump, because that's the one thing she has pushed back and said to the President of the United States. If you want to help make Boston safer, then send us some better gun safety laws nationally. We're doing a good job here in Massachusetts, but help us out nationally so guns don't get imported from elsewhere. Help us with health care. Help us with housing. Those are the things that will help make Boston an even better city. Donald Trump doesn't like anyone who doesn't bend the knee. So frankly, I'm not surprised that he's trying to pick some kind of fight with Michelle Wu, but I don't think it's going to work.
You know, he did say, Senator, that he thought that the mayor was, in fact, intelligent and smarter than some of the other mayors. For what it's worth, I put that out there. He was being asked about these street takeovers that have taken place, the pro-Palestinian protests that have in some cases been pretty large scale in Boston. I'm just wondering, what would be your response and what should be Governor Healey's response if Donald Trump decides that your hometown is next for National Guard troops?
Well, so I just want to be clear on what you're talking about. Mayor Wu put out a very strong statement about this and said, we're not going to do this. She's also put out a strong statement when a police officer got hurt, when there had been a protest. Look, everybody has problems, things happen, but that's why we have our local police, that's why we have our state police, and they are doing an excellent job. We don't need any national troops to come in to somehow flatter Donald Trump's ego.
Certainly wouldn't be the first time. Would you pursue legal action if he did, Senator?
Oh, yes. Look, what Donald Trump is trying to do right now in California, in Illinois, is pretty clearly illegal. And the courts have already said so across the board, that he does not have the authority to engage in this kind of takeover of American cities. Same thing for Portland. But this is about more than just what is legal. This is about Donald Trump trying to find as many ways as possible to suppress, to shut up, to hush anyone who disagrees with Donald Trump. And that's true whether we're talking about mayors of big cities, or we're talking about late-night comedians, or we're talking about elected officials. Donald Trump cares most about using the federal government and its power to silence dissent rather than to advance the interests of the American people. That is the central problem we have. And it just keeps cropping up over and over because Donald Trump wants government to serve him personally, not the American people.
Never one to mince words. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. Thank you, Senator, for joining us on Bloomberg.
Thank you for having me.
Joining us now with more on that $20 billion bailout package we started our conversation about here in President Trump's meeting with Argentina's Milei is Bloomberg's Daniel Flatley, who joins us live from the IMF here in Washington, D.C. Dan, is this bailout, if I can call it that, as good as done?
Yeah, it's a great question, Joe. I mean, it's interesting to hear President Trump's comments at the White House earlier today when he was meeting with President Milei of Argentina. He sort of said something that quite frankly confused a lot of folks who've been watching this very carefully, which is that we will support Argentina, we will support President Milei because he is pursuing an economic philosophy that we agree with. But he has to win that October midterm election. His party has to win that October midterm election. If they don't, our support may be withdrawn, or at least there will be less enthusiasm to continue to extend that support. What we don't know at this moment is that $20 billion swap line that you're referring to, which has been in discussion now for several weeks, dating back to the UN General Assembly when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent first put that forward. Does that $20 billion swap line, is that swap line contingent upon Milei's party doing well in this upcoming election, winning this upcoming election, or will the aid flow before the election as a bridge to the election, as Bessent has suggested earlier, or could it come after the election if the party does well? So, you know, there's still some details that we're hoping to flesh out over the next few days, coming hours, and certainly by tomorrow morning or afternoon, as we get more details from both the U.S. side and the Argentine side.
Dan, I imagine there was some surprise today with those comments and how to dissect them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you know, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is always very careful in how he sort of talks about this support and puts it out there. Late last week, he talked about the direct U.S. Treasury intervention in the Argentine market, where U.S. Treasury bought Argentine pesos. That was very clear, at least in terms of how he presented that. President Trump has a different style, you know, as we are all familiar with in terms of talking about these things, and he was more general in his comments. He obviously has a fondness for President Milei. He talked about him wanting to make Argentina great again, which is, of course, an echo of his tagline, "Make America Great Again." And he sort of indicated that if the election does not go Milei's direction, that the U.S. may reevaluate the strength of its support. And that, I think, has some investors nervous because, of course, you have the political dynamic in Argentina and you also have the economic dynamic. And while they are related, they are not completely separate. And so both of those will have to move at different paces.
Thanks for spending some time with us during a busy day, Daniel Flatley. We'll see you soon. And coming up, the IMF is warning that the global economy is showing signs of strains from U.S. tariffs. We'll bring you the details up ahead. But first, while the Gaza truce is bringing relief to many in the Middle East, some Arab states are looking ahead to what comes next. We'll discuss with Danon, Israeli ambassador to the UN, next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We have told them we want to disarm, and they will disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently. But they will disarm. Do you understand me?
Yes, you say
because
quickly.
you always, everyone says, oh, well, they won't disarm. They will disarm. And I spoke to Hamas, and I said, you're going to disarm, right? Yes, sir, we're going to disarm. That's what they told me.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Julie Fine, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. President Trump there earlier today saying that he spoke directly with Hamas about disarming and discussing what will happen if Hamas does not, which is a major component, of course, of their ceasefire agreement with Israel.
This comes after the president expressed his frustration with Hamas that the remains of the non-living hostages in Gaza have yet to be returned. Trump writing on social media, all 20 hostages are back and feeling as good as can be expected. A big burden has been lifted, but the job is not done. The dead have not been returned as promised. Joining us now with his perspective, Danon, Israeli ambassador to the UN. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you for having me.
I want to begin with those powerful images we saw yesterday. It's been 24 hours. The hostages that went home are there now. Have you spoken to any of their families, and how's everybody doing?
Well, you know, yesterday we watched a miracle. You know, we prayed for this moment for 2 years, and to see the reunification with the families. You know, it will be a process for healing. You know, the testimony, they spoke with some of the families. You know, we heard horrible stories about hostages who were chained for 2 years. That's beyond imagination. Hostages who were starved and tortured. So we hope that, you know, they will take the time with their families. It will be a long process for them to recover, but we are grateful that they are back home. But unfortunately, you know, we haven't received the sealed hostages, and Hamas is not complying with the agreement. We have received only 8 bodies out of 28, and we hope and demand that in the next few hours, we will receive the remaining hostages which are still in the hand of Hamas.
That is obviously certainly news those families will be waiting for. I want to turn to what we showed you earlier with the president talking about disarming. Are you comfortable and confident that Hamas will disarm, and what really is the path forward there?
Well, first, I think the first phase is easier than the second one because it's very clear. You know, we released terrorists, that's part of the agreement, and we should receive the hostages. The second phase, it's more complicated. When you speak about disarmament, and we are talking about thousands of weapons and the demilitarization of Gaza, it's a long process, and it's not going to be easy. I hope that Hamas will comply with the agreement. But, you know, we did not withdrew completely from Gaza because we stayed in the area in order to make sure that they actually disarm. We cannot allow Hamas to stay in power. I hope they will not play games with Israel or with the negotiators, and they will understand that the agreement must be fulfilled and that they have no future in Gaza.
Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned the remains of hostages. I had not heard that 8, in fact, was the number right now, 8 of 28. President Trump did post about this on social media earlier today, saying the dead have not been returned as promised. Phase 2 begins right now. I don't know what he has in store for Hamas in this case, but we have heard from Hamas leaders that they may not be able to locate all of the remains because of the intense destruction in Gaza. If they cannot, what will that mean for the ceasefire?
So, Joe, allow me to go into those details. It's a sensitive issue, but we have to look at the facts. We know, and Hamas know that we know, that they know the whereabouts of the majority of the bodies of the hostages. And we expected them to release the majority of them. And though they cannot find, in the agreement there is a mechanism with the negotiators how to find them. And we can share information with them, and we build that mechanism. Unfortunately, what happened, instead of releasing all of the bodies at the same time, we received 4 bodies yesterday that we identified. And in the last few hours, we received another 4 bodies that we have to identify. It will take us a few hours. So I assume that we will have 8 hostages back home. But Hamas can do more than that. They are capable. We know that they know the location of more hostages who were deceased and buried in Gaza. And we expect them not to play any games with us, to release those hostages, to allow them to be brought to proper burial in Israel with their families. And then we can move on for the next stages.
Just to be clear, Ambassador, do you believe that Hamas knows where the majority of the remains are? 26 out of 28 is what we had heard.
I will not go into the exact number, but yes, Joe, the majority of the remaining, they know the whereabouts, and we know the whereabouts, and we share that information. So I think they should do more and not play those games. The negotiators are involved, they are speaking with them, and I hope that in the next day we'll be able to receive the majority of the hostages, and then we will see the negotiators taking a more active role in finding the other locations.
Mr. Ambassador, there is also the question now of Gaza moving forward. You saw the president with world leaders talking about their commitment to getting aid in and Gaza. What do you think is the future?
Well, I think that it's important to have more partners, and President Trump is leading in that direction to get the international community on board. And I think the challenge will not be the funding or the reconstruction. The challenge will be to uproot the hold of Hamas, not only from the government, but also from the education system, healthcare system, the aid itself. You don't want Hamas to run Gaza when you bring in hundreds of millions of dollars into construction and infrastructure. So I think that will be the challenge, to build a mechanism that will not allow Hamas to regain power through the aid. And they say they are willing to do it, but we'll have to wait and see if it actually happens.
It's great to have you with us, Ambassador. Danon, Israel's ambassador to the UN. We thank you for your time. Coming up, we'll turn back to the ongoing government shutdown that has now entered its 14th day and discuss what exactly lawmakers are strategizing for their next move. When we speak with Republican Congressman Troy Downing of Montana, he's up next on a range of issues, only here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The tariff shock is here, and it is further dimming already weak growth prospects. This is clear even in the US. Growth is revised down from last year, the labor market is weakening, and inflation has been revised up and is persistently above target, signs that the economy has been hit by a negative supply shock.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Julie Fine. That was Pierre-Olivier Gourinchas, the chief economist at the IMF, speaking earlier today about the impact of tariffs on the global economy.
Now, as the IMF annual meetings kick off in Washington, the World Bank Group is warning that the global economy is showing signs of strains from sweeping U.S. tariffs and protectionism, even though it so far has held up better than expected. Joining us now with the details here in our Washington bureau is Bloomberg's Enda Curran. Enda, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Julie. The simple message from the IMF today, saying on the one hand, the growth has held up better than expected. The world economy is doing okay, but they said there's a question mark over how long that will last, because rising protectionism and rising tariffs will eventually start to bite, flow through in terms of higher prices, flow through in terms of inflation, and then drag on consumers. So dragging on the production and the supply side of the global economy and on the consumer side, which is the US.
Who gets the worst of it, the US or the rest of the world?
Both ways. I mean, the US consumer will get higher prices at some point and risk of inflation, but the producers will face slowing demand. So it's a dual-pronged threat from tariffs, was their message.
Mm-hmm.
And the Fed Chair Jerome Powell left the option open today for a rate cut. What else were your major takeaways from this?
It was very interesting listening to the chair. He came out and said, even without government data due to the shutdown, we think the economy is where we thought it was a month ago. The jobs market is slowing, even as the broader economy is okay. So people took that as a message. Interest rates will be cut again at some point soon. Now, he didn't give any firmer signal than that. He didn't for sure say we will lock in October. He certainly didn't give a signal beyond October in terms of where they're going. But near term, the message was rates are coming down because they're worried about the employment market. And that was probably the biggest takeaway from Chairman Powell.
Enda, thank you. Bloomberg's Enda Curran getting us rolling here as we consider the comments today from Fed Chair Jay Powell indicating that labor market prospects are continuing to worsen. The government shutdown is also starting to impact jobs. The White House Budget Office vowing to continue laying off government agency workers, but will pay military members and federal law enforcement as the U.S. shutdown enters its 14th day. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, talked to reporters about the state of the shutdown earlier. Let's listen.
I don't have anything to negotiate. I'll say this again to everyone here. We did not load up the temporary funding bill with any Republican priorities or partisan priorities at all. I don't have anything that I can take off of that document to make it more palatable for them. So all I am able to do is come to this microphone every day, look right into the camera, and plead with the American people.
Joining us now live from Capitol Hill with his perspective is Republican Congressman Troy Downing of Montana, who's a member of the House Financial Services Committee, which is why you likely recognize his face and his voice. Congressman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. This is an interesting moment that we are in because the administration, and I guess the Speaker himself, by way of keeping the House out of session, has removed all the potential pain points from the calendar, right? We had a payday coming up for the military. The president says he's got that covered with funds along with federal law enforcement, and now they're moving monies to help save the WIC program from going without funding as soon as this weekend. Maybe it's no wonder the Speaker of the House suggested we could be in for a record shutdown. Is there any reason for anyone to start talking here, or are we going to be in uncharted territory soon?
Well, I think we are in uncharted territory, but I'm just going to underline what the Speaker just said, is we did our work in the House. We put a spending bill out there that by design did not have anything political. This was a bipartisan extension, a continuing resolution so that we could do the good work of appropriating. I think there's a desire, especially in the Republican conference, to get back to regular order where we're actually getting through 12 appropriations bills on time, on budget, and going through that process. And there's been some great work that's happened on both the House and the Senate side. We just need to have those reconciled and get it moved through. The fact that the Senate Democrats are trying to attach, I'll say, red herring to this, political wish lists onto this, rather than just having us open the government and do the good work of debating and negotiating and finishing these spending bills, is beyond me. I share Speaker Johnson's frustration. I'm not sure what else we can do. We passed a bill to keep the government open, and now we're having to use executive order to fund, our military. You mentioned the WIC program, all these important programs to keep it going, to lessen the pain for the American people. But this is not good for the country. This is not good for Americans. The American people don't want this, and we've already passed a bill. I'm not sure what else we can do to get the Democrats to pass this so that we can get to the work of actually debating the policy here.
So if you aren't sitting down and there are no discussions, what happens to soybean farmers? What happens to people who are traveling that are sitting there waiting for more TSA? I mean, what's the future like?
Yeah, and that actually, those are all really good points. And obviously, our farmers and ranchers are suffering right now, and we need to make sure that we have those programs. I just actually ran into Secretary Rollins earlier today that we need to make sure that we're getting them the support, because they're not just the soybeans. We've got our wheat growers in Montana. We've got problems, across the country with our farmers. And I just want to underline that in my district, my biggest economic driver in my district is agriculture. And I'm talking to these folks, and they don't want handouts. They want to be able to start selling their product again. But in the meantime, we need to help them get through this next phase so that they're not going bankrupt. They're already having to pay for inputs when they haven't actually sold last year's crop or this year's crop. And so they're in a lot of trouble. We need to have a little bit of an off-ramp for them to get back to being able to sell their product. And that, again, is being stifled because the government is shut down. So that's another sector that is in pain right now. And one other thing that you mentioned I think is important to note, and it just really shows the difference in where the Republican conference is from the Democrat conference. You've got Chuck Schumer, first of all, saying that the longer this goes on, the better it is for them. But the other thing I heard is we'll start to see some change when planes start falling out of the sky, which is just a ridiculous position. People need to be able to travel. We need industry working. We need our federal employees paid. We need to actually get back to work and get to the good work of actually debating and negotiating spending bills, not having them as an ultimatum of shutting the government down and making everybody suffer if the other side doesn't get their way.
Making me want to take Amtrak, Congressman. As far as the Obamacare subsidies go, I know you referred to that as a red herring, and I understand what the Republican position on this is. We had the speaker on the air with us, and he made it clear that he sees this as a year-end issue, not a September one. But here we are in October. You've got open enrollment about to begin, and I just wonder if you worry that when people see notices of higher premiums coming, that they will choose to not seek coverage at all.
I think you will see some of that. But again, these enhanced premium tax credits, this was a Democrat bill that they intentionally had expire at the end of this year. To make it the issue right now to be a condition of opening the government, again, it's a red herring. They might as well have said, we're not going to open the government unless you build us a bullet train. I mean, it's completely unrelated to the government shutdown in this continuing resolution. But, with the enhanced premium tax credits, there are a lot of problems in this. The EPTC is there to mask some fundamental failures in what's going on in the Affordable Care Act right now. And these are things that we need to debate. We need to actually have these conversations, respectfully and in committee, not as this, ransom note to the American people. And that's the part that I think is distasteful for a lot of folks in my conference, is they're using this to hold the American people hostage and have nothing move forward, have nobody get paid, have all these issues with the federal government and private industry that depends on services from the federal government unless they get this. And here's what it comes down to. It's entirely political. They don't want Trump to succeed. It just comes down to the simple fact they don't want Trump to succeed. And this is what they threw into the mess to confound us and hopefully try to get the Republican Party to undo the good bill that we already did to keep the government open and start working on these appropriations bills. And it's entirely political. And I find that personally distasteful.
Congressman, I want to turn your attention to comments from Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. She said that some Republican men are weak. She said, quote, "There's a lot of weak Republican men, and they're more afraid of strong Republican women. So they always try to marginalize the strong Republican women that actually want to do something and actually want to achieve." I just am curious your thoughts on those comments.
I have not seen that, and I don't share any committees with Representative Taylor Greene, and so I have nothing to comment on that other than, everybody's got a voice here, everybody's got a vote here, and I have not seen within our conference, anybody that's been discounted, because of any reasons like that. I think that we all need to come to the table and have respectful dialogue on how we actually get to the point where we have good policy for the American people.
So you feel everybody is being heard?
Yes, I think they are, yes.
Well, Congressman, I'm not sure where we're going to go from here. Go ahead. Finish your answer.
Well, I just want to make a point is, I've always said in my career, I'm always going to listen. I'm always going to consider, so you're always going to be heard, but I never promise I'm going to agree. I mean, that's kind of where I think we are. We don't always agree, even though I do believe everybody's being heard.
Understood, Congressman. I want to ask you about a piece of legislation that you have to codify the president's EO on 401k plans. This is something that's important to our listeners and viewers here at Bloomberg. As you might suggest, it would enshrine into law the EO that would allow access to alternative investments, specifically private equity, real estate, and crypto. Are we going to be buying Bitcoin in our 401ks soon?
Well, this goes way back in my history, back when I was in the securities industry in the private sector. One of the first times I really got involved in politics was when Dodd-Frank was coming down the pipe. But one of the things that always, frustrated me was even the definition of an accredited investor. I found that to be fundamentally un-American. I think that as the person who's actually selling or soliciting the security, you need to be honest. You have to not, defraud people. You need to give, risks out there, but an American should be able to make the choices on what risks they want to make with their own investment dollars. And so that's part of it. And now here's an extension. In your 401k, I think that you should be able to access alternative markets. I know a lot of people who have been very successful investing in alternatives, and that can be crypto, that can be, real estate, like you mentioned. It can be a lot of different alternatives. But I don't think that the government should be telling anybody that that is something off reach for you because you're not smart enough to understand what it is. And so this allows people to make their own decisions, and I think that it's about time because I think that restriction was fundamentally un-American.
A lot of topics there. Republican Congressman Troy Downing of Montana, thanks so much for being with us. Coming up, the Trump administration is inviting all U.S. colleges to participate in a compact that would grant preferential federal funding in return for commitments to specific policy changes. We'll bring you the details. And a new TSA video starring DHS Secretary Kristi Noem is causing quite a stir at the airports. We'll discuss with our political panel next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio. Alongside Julie Fine, I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. We'll turn back to the impact of the ongoing government shutdown with our political panel in just a moment. First, the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief.
National news organizations, including Bloomberg News, are refusing to sign on to new Pentagon reporting limits set by Secretary Pete Hegseth. This comes after the Pentagon Press Group condemned the proposed rules last week, calling them, quote, an unprecedented message of intimidation. This marks the latest attempt by Secretary Hegseth to limit reporter access, previously cutting the amount of press briefings and declaring large portions of the building off limits to reporters unless they have an escort. Hegseth responded to their refusals in an ex post last night, saying that Pentagon access is a privilege, not a right.
The Trump administration inviting all U.S. colleges to participate in a compact that would grant preferential federal funding in return for commitments to policy changes such as DEI bans. The compact, initially sent out to 9 universities earlier this month, was rejected by MIT Friday, the university calling it inconsistent, and that, quote, scientific funding should be based on scientific merit alone, unquote. President Trump says all colleges who reject the deal will face federal investigations into compliance with federal law.
And Bloomberg News is reporting tonight on the growing risks from a logjam in the construction of U.S. Navy submarines, the warships at the forefront of the geopolitical face-off with China. The subforce faces multiple crises, from maintenance slowdowns that have idled one boat since 2015 to years-long delays in building new models capable of launching nuclear missiles or stalking other submarines. Bloomberg Intelligence estimates that the U.S. still has a 5 to 10-year lead over foreign adversaries, but shipbuilders' woes are threatening to erode that edge.
Major airports across the country, including Atlanta, Chicago, New York, Salt Lake City, Newark, New Jersey, and more, are now refusing to show a new video from Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, in which she blames Democrats both for the government shutdown and air traffic delays. Here's a sample.
Hi, I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. It is TSA's top priority to make sure that you have the most pleasant and efficient airport experience as possible while we keep you safe. However, Democrats in Congress refuse to fund the federal government, and because of this, many of our operations are impacted, and most of our TSA employees are working without pay. We will continue to do all that we can to avoid delays that will impact your travel. And our hope is that Democrats will soon recognize the importance of opening the government.
See, it's not just Bloomberg that's on at the airport. Just the latest in the war of words between the administration and Democrats amid the ongoing government shutdown. And joining us now with their reaction to this story and more, this evening's political panel. Republican strategist Lester Munson, principal of the international practice at BGR Group, is with us alongside Democratic strategist Megan Hayes, the former special assistant to President Biden. Great to see you both and welcome. This is kind of funny, right? I know you'd rather watch Bloomberg at the airport, but this is consistent with the administration's approach. If you go to the front page of many agencies, it blames radical left Democrats for the government shutdown. It's kind of a new level of blame game, isn't it?
It is. I think weirdly, factually correct. Democrats are refusing to fund the government. I'm not sure it's appropriate for the secretary to say that to blame it on the Democrats, to have this kind of partisan message.
Right.
But I note she did just get it on the news, so that message has gone out now. If they really wanted to show in the airports, you would find
it worked?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it may have worked. You would find a more clever way of saying this without kind of going down the partisan lane by blaming Democrats specifically. I think they could have been a little bit more clever here if they wanted to, but I don't think they wanted to.
When you see this, Megan, and you see the airports specifically that have made this decision, that have decided to do it, what goes through your mind?
That they're petty and unserious, and this is coming from the President of the United States and people who work for him who are in charge of running our government. It's not only against the law as a Hatch Act violation, but I don't agree that it is factually inaccurate. I just don't think she should be weighing into this. She is not a member of Congress. If she cared to be doing something to say, she should be out there saying, thank you so much to our TSA workers who are not being paid during this shutdown. Please be kind to them. Would be a less petty thing to do. It's just immature and petty.
Do you think that by the way, do you think that it works with people, or do you think people are just thinking, hey, I just want my flight to be on time? Like, do you think this message is actually permeating?
I think it's probably, I think each side in this broader debate is speaking to their base, and they kind of like the situation, which is why we're in this standoff. The Trump messages, I think, are resonating with Republican voters. I think the Democrats' messages are resonating with Democratic voters. And the real problem here is neither side is really trying to reach out across the aisle and get this thing done, which is, we all know, there are not huge issues at stake here. And at the end of the day, I suspect the Trump administration is going to agree to largely what the Democrats want. So why not just get there now?
Apparently in for a list on Friday. I don't know if you heard the president talking today, but he's going to have a list of agencies and programs that will be closed if the government shutdown continues, but not just any programs. Listen to the way the president put this earlier today.
So we're closing up programs that are Democrat programs that we wanted to close up or that we never wanted to happen, and now we're closing them up. And we're not going to let them come back. The Democrats are getting killed. And we're going to have a list of them on Friday, closing up some of the most egregious, socialist, semi-communist, probably not full communist, we're saving that for New York, but semi-communist programs, and we're closing them up. We're not closing up Republican programs because we think they work.
I'm getting confused here. Maybe you guys can tell me the difference between Republican and Democrat programs, as he puts it. Aren't they all in the same part of the same administration? That's his administration.
Right. One would think that, and I would venture to guess the special education parents that receive those funds are not exactly calling.
Is that the program he's talking about?
He just fired everyone from that office last week. So I'm guessing those people who live in red states do not necessarily believe those are Republican or Democratic programs, and their children are going to suffer greatly from not having the funding from those programs.
But there are Republican families benefiting from those programs.
100%.
Right? So,
because we're all Americans. You are the president for the entire United States.
Do you know what Democrat programs he's talking about?
I think they already killed a lot of those. I know that was kind of the focus of what they did to the foreign assistance program, or at least that was the talking points.
They cleaned out Department of Education. I guess that might count as well?
Again, like there's plenty of Republican parents who are concerned about public funding of schools, and the extent to which that's getting shut off by some of these maneuvers here in Washington. There could be some exposure. There's a little element of truth in what the president is saying. There are constituencies for different programs that do kind of differ across the two parties. There's no doubt about that, and it's classic Trump to say, "I'm going to do this on Friday," so keep paying attention for the next 96 hours.
But does there get to a point with, no matter what constituency you are, everybody's talking to their base, as you both have explained. But at the end of the day, when people are losing services, doesn't everybody just get frustrated?
Yeah, and you really kind of hope there's some sort of kind of rock in the stream here that changes the flow of this thing, because it doesn't seem like there's anything coming up that's going to change it. If the administration can find money to pay the military in the next couple of days, then they're going to avoid a little bit of a challenge that they would have had. So we'll see what is the thing that can stop this kind of dynamic in each party.
Enter Time magazine, which gave Donald Trump the cover. Remember when he had his own cover made? It was sort of famously hung in the office. He's got his own now with the red frame. And what looked like, I don't know, a pretty nice picture of the president looking to the heavens. His triumph, the headline. President Trump on Truth Social. Time magazine wrote a relatively good story about me, but the picture may be the worst of all time. He says, they disappeared my hair. And then had something floating on top of my head that looked like a floating crown, but an extremely small one, really weird. I never liked taking pictures from underneath angles, but this is a super bad picture. Lester, do you agree?
It's possible the president is a little vain, and I'm just learning this. I'm just hearing about this for the first time
tonight.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. That's a pretty bad photo, especially when he really likes the one where it's like the mugshot and he's kind of glaring at the camera and being the tough guy. He looks old. He looks really old in that photo.
Brutal.
You can ask any 15-year-old that's on social media.
You never shoot up. Face, right?
You never shoot up. I mean, the thing he's not saying is he looks old from his neck and he looks overweight. So I think that's what he's not saying out loud here.
I thought you were about to empathize with the president of the United
States. He is right that it is a terrible photo. They did him dirty.
Bail us out, Julie. Fine.
Well, I do have to say that when I'm having a picture taken, I want the angle to be up. I think we all do. It's just a more flattering picture.
Glad we established all of this. Thank you both for humoring us.
Thank you for this important conversation, Lester Munson and Megan Hayes. We really appreciate you being with us.
To learn more about these stories we discussed here this evening, maybe save the Time magazine photo. Make sure to check out the Washington Edition newsletter. Oh, no, that's in there, too. You can find it on the terminal and online. I hope you enjoyed this exercise once again, because we're going to do this all over again tomorrow as we keep tabs on not only the list that's coming out on Friday, but tomorrow will be day 15 of the government shutdown, and that was supposed to be the inflection point, the day that active duty military troops would start missing their pay. So we're going to keep asking questions about this administration plan to find more monies to do just that.
I think tomorrow is going to be very critical in that respect to see what happens there. I mean, the president has guaranteed this, but how long does this go? How long can this go on?
These are the questions we're asking, with the Speaker of the House suggesting it could be a record setter. So thank you for joining us here on Balance of Power. We'll have a lot more tomorrow, beginning on the early edition. Alongside Julie Fine, I'm Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg.